Talk. So on the 4th of July, Governor J.B. Pritzker was in Highland Park to respect the one-year anniversary of the Independence Day mass shooting that happened there, taking the lives of 7 people and dozens of others injured after an assailant used a semi-automatic rifle from a rooftop and fired dozens of rounds into the crowd a year ago on July 4th in Highland Park. Then, of course, after that, you had the debate around gun legislation looking to ban certain types of semi-automatic firearms. After the Democrats passed that in the final hours of the previous General Assembly, Governor J.B. Pritzker signed that ban into effect January 10th. Since then, there have been lawsuits filed in state and federal courts, and we're still in a holding pattern for both the state-level case that was filed by State Representative Dan Calkins that's still in the Illinois Supreme Court. No indication when they're going to release a ruling on that, but that deals with the issue of special legislation and also the issue of equal protections. In federal court, you've got the cases challenging the state and local bans in Naperville, Chicago, and Cook County. Those cases from the Southern District and the Northern District all consolidated in the appeals court, still waiting on the appeals court to issue a ruling in that case. So Governor J.B. Pritzker, let's just kind of revisit some of what he had to say on 4th of July in Highland Park, where he discussed the need, he says, for more firearm legislation and more gun control efforts, not just in Illinois, but also across the country. So here is Governor J.B. Pritzker touching on that, as we heard yesterday.
Remember, we've banned assault weapons, we've banned high-capacity magazines, we've banned switches that turn regular guns into automatic weapons. And here in Illinois, those are things that will keep people safe and alive, but we need a national ban. And I've spoken directly with the president, I've spoken with our leaders in the House and the Senate, and I'm hopeful, I really am, that remembering a terrible day like what happened a year ago is something that'll spur action. And this community remembers all the other communities that are suffering from gun violence, including Chicago, including Rockford, including Peoria. And that's a wonderful thing about the people in this community. But we all should be thinking about everyone who is under threat of gun violence from semi-automatic weapons and who's actually suffered from a mass shooting, especially over the last couple days in other states.
So again, Governor J.B. Pritzker there talking about the need, he says, for a ban on semi-automatic weapons nationwide. And this is actually something that even the White House yesterday highlighted in a news conference, just briefly talking about the president's schedule. Karine Jean-Pierre took to the White House podium and specifically highlighted Illinois as to a beacon the White House sees as something that could be done nationwide. Here is Karine Jean-Pierre from yesterday during a White House news conference touching on the issue of Illinois and the need that they say is for more gun control across the country. And go. 1, 2, 3, go. Here we are. Here's Karine Jean-Pierre.
Yesterday, the president also marked 1 year since a shooter armed with an AR-15 style weapon fired upon a crowd of Americans gathered for an Independence Day parade in Highland Park, Illinois. And he highlighted how in the year since, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Highland Park Mayor Nancy Rotering, legislative leaders, and numerous advocates and gun violence survivors have fought tirelessly to ban assault weapons, like the one used in Highland Park, as well as high-capacity magazines across Illinois. But as we have seen over the last few days, there's a lot more work to do to address the epidemic of gun violence that is tearing up our communities, tearing it apart. As it relates to what else can be done, one of the reasons that we lift up states like Illinois and other states that have been able to get an assault weapons ban done or get more done as it relates to gun reform, because it's important. It's important to highlight and to show that states can also get involved and make change in their own state and protect their communities, protect their kids, protect people who are vulnerable, who are dying essentially because of this epidemic.
So again, Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House spokesperson, answering questions and highlighting Illinois as what they see as a good goal to get done nationwide, having a ban on certain semi-automatic firearms and magazine capacities. Of course, that was in the mix of dozens of questions about cocaine being found at the White House. But regardless, we'll leave that to some of the other outlets to further delve into when it comes to that white powdery substance being found at the White House. But the issue of firearms, of course, we've heard the governor, we heard the White House. What about the gun rights advocates? Todd Vandermyde, I connected with him yesterday to get his reaction to what the governor had to say on Independence Day. And here's Todd's initial reaction to that ongoing question and concern.
I think he's clutching to whatever pearls and straws he can to make it seem like that, they're on the upper hand of this. But I think he's got a lot of concern that the court's going to strike down the gun ban that they put in place. And he has a, very valid fear there because based on everything we're seeing with stuff falling across the country, Judge Easterbrook and his comments seem to be the outlier.
So about those comments from Judge Easterbrook, Governor J.B. Pritzker on 4th of July, Independence Day in Highland Park, talked about the questions that the judge raised during the hearing from last week. And here's, again, the governor's comments about those questions that the judges asked.
I'm heartened by the questioning that took place at the appeals court the other day, where Judge Easterbrook and Judge Wood asked questions about, is it really going to be a popularity contest which guns we're going to allow? Because the people who are advocating for semi-automatic weapons were saying, well, gee, everybody's got one now, so you can't ban them. Well, that's ridiculous. If everybody had a missile launcher, we shouldn't ban missile launchers. So I think they took the right tack. I'm hopeful that the decision will come down along the line of their question.
Now, regardless of which way the ruling comes down in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, it's expected to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. The timing of all of this still very much uncertain. What did Todd Vandermyde have to say about that? Well, we'll hear about that next here with Springfield's Morning News. Stay tuned. I'm Greg.
I'm heartened by the questioning that took place at the appeals court the other day, where Judge Easterbrook and Judge Wood asked questions about, is it really going to be a popularity contest which guns we're going to allow? Because the people who are advocating for semi-automatic weapons were saying, well, gee, everybody's got one now, so you can't ban them. Well, that's ridiculous. If everybody had a missile launcher, we shouldn't ban missile launchers. So I think they took the right tack. I'm hopeful that the decision will come down along the line of their question.
So again, Governor J.B. Pritzker at Highland Park on Tuesday being asked about the hearing in the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in the challenge of Illinois' gun and magazine ban. I connected with Todd Vandermyde, gun rights advocate, also somebody who's been consulting with plaintiffs in that case, and got his reaction to the governor talking about the hearing and the ultimate trajectory of all of this, and the question of, well, what about missile launchers? If missile launchers were commonly owned, can we not ban missile launchers? Here's Todd.
It seems like Fonzie jumped a shark bigger than the governor. And now the governor has, reciprocated in that. They keep jumping to the absurd. Nobody here is arguing for missiles, rocket launchers, bazookas, or anything of the sort. They just keep jumping to the absurd that if you allow rifles, shotguns, and pistols, then you have to allow all this other stuff. And nobody is arguing. That's not even before the court anyway. But they keep just trying to drag the argument to fall back on if that's where they have to go to. They can't sit there and explain why modern semi-automatic firearms should be banned. And I think you saw that when Judge Easterbrook asked the question. One of his few enlightening moments is to when he sat there and asked the question of the state is, would the Winchester lever gun, the 1892, the gun that won the West, be protected under the Second Amendment? And Pritzker's people, the Attorney General's people, nobody could bring themselves to say, yes, that's a protected arm. And that was the modern day equivalent of an AR back in 1892.
So again, the question of how the case is ultimately going to go in the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals still unknown. Whatever the outcome, it's fully anticipated it'll go to the U.S. Supreme Court for them to deal with. But all of this while you've got questions of how do we keep the streets safe from not just deranged individuals with semi-automatic firearms, but also from gang violence. And we see that. Next segment, we'll actually delve into some of the happenings in Chicago over the holiday weekend, and a large gathering that resulted in 100 shots being fired, according to Chicago police, early yesterday morning. So we'll hear about that. But how do we combat this? Is it to go after law-abiding citizens' ability to obtain certain types of semi-automatic firearms? Or is there something deeper percolating under the surface that's causing this type of violence to occur, not just in the streets of Chicago, but elsewhere throughout the state and across the country as we see those continued headlines? And while the governor and Democrats seem to say, well, we just have to go after the gun. It's the gun. It's the gun. It's the gun. It's the gun. Others see it in a different way, seeing that there's some deep systemic issues. Maybe it's the family. Maybe it's mental health. Maybe it's lack of education, a lack of opportunity, and these types of things. But Todd, he laid out some of the things that he sees are problematic with policies being enacted by Democrats in the state of Illinois that he says are not keeping the streets safe.
You would think so. You'd think we'd be kind of like, we've got almost all the laws California has, and you would think that we would be right up in there in the safety zone, but it's just the opposite. FOID card's been around since 1968. It hasn't done anything except keep guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. I mean, we've had the FOID card, and we've had some record years of 900 murders in Chicago. They've had everything they wanted in Chicago. They had handgun bans. They've got semi-auto bans. None of that has mattered. Has the state semi-auto ban slowed anything down in Chicago? No. I think that their answer to failure is to heap more laws on law-abiding citizens. So, it just proves that all of their plans are abject failures, that there is the gun control does not work because they continue to keep on piling on people like me and you. They don't go after the criminals. Oh, no, we're going to give them electrical monitoring. Oh, no, we're going to let them go out for 48 hours. Oh, no, we're not going to require cash bail. So I think what we've seen is that their blame against the law-abiding gun owner is an abject failure, and their idea of criminal justice reform and having a catch-and-release program is if it's a bass fishing tournament is another abject failure. So all of their policies in toto are pretty much abject failures.
So the debate continues with the litigation ongoing in both state and federal court against Illinois' gun and magazine ban, with the unanswered question of how to fully address in a meaningful way the violence that we see on the streets of Chicago and elsewhere throughout the country. So we'll be watching all of this and